sports stories, right? Yes.
Heroics.
You know, the fish always get a little bigger, they weigh a little more. Anyway, but for those of you, I think most of you know who I am. I am Bob Callett, Vice President of the Hall of Fame. And on behalf of our President Mark Seidel, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, I want to welcome everyone to the 60's sports reunion. I think a lot of you were here about 5 years ago. We had a 50's sports reunion. And you think about it, we put that on because we wanted to get those stories before the people passed away. And I mean, it's very sad that out of those people that were here for the 50's, Jerry Burns, deceased. Gordy Losey, deceased. Coach Dan Valerio, deceased. Whitey Dzinski in a nursing home with dementia. I think the only panel member that probably is still moving around is Tommy Burke. So, not that we expect any of these guys to be leaving. No pressure. It's out of here now. Nothing around the panel. I want to check. Is there a doctor in the house? Anyway, I do want to thank, first of all, a few people. Number one, Sarah Larson, who is filming. Sarah spent a lot of time in the John Fortunato room, getting it organized for a 60's theme. And I know a lot of you came in, they come in late, but if you haven't had a chance to visit and go in the Fortunato room, I encourage you to do that at some point before you leave tonight. Sarah spent a lot of time there, so thank you, Sarah, for doing that. And also, again, I'd like to thank my wife, Patty, who helps out a lot at these events, serving as bartender and all that. She is not going to come out and serve you. I know that. So if you want a drink or you want some snacks, just feel free to get up, especially when Bart's talking. So don't feel bad. Anyway, we did put a bunch of plaques of people who might have either played or during the 60's. And we made sure that, where's Dave Raponi? We made sure that we put Dave Raponi's on the bottom shelf so that he would be able to see it. So it's in there. And I just, where's Maury? And I know, you know, Maury and John Fasolo, I don't know what to say. They get the award. You probably heard it already, but John and Maury showed up last Wednesday for this program. I mean, I know they maybe had the excuse of going to St. Anthony's, but I don't know. It was never to be late. But anyway, they're back. They're back for more punishment tonight.
John was so excited to come here. That's why we came last week.
It was a dry run. We had to dry run.
Don't come back next week.
All right, but you know, I think we have a nice turnout, and we're looking forward to hearing some stories. I won't say live, but some stories from our panel. And I know Dave Mills, who is chairman of this event, wants this to be interactive, and I'm sure he will explain that a little more. So we're looking for other stories.
They know what interactive means.
So, without further ado, I would like to turn this over to the chairman of this event, our former past president and a Hall of Fame inductee himself, and a 60's guy, Dave Mills.
It's not on? Okay, perfect. We didn't know that. Again, we want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This was, it's with the media now, and we try to get a lot of publicity out through social media, etc., but you don't know if you're getting it out or not. There's no contact information. So we're very happy that you came, and very happy that it's going to be a good night. As John tried to explain, what we try to do is get a panel together that represented the 60's to try to start the conversation going. But it's most fun when the audience adds some stories. And as we get through the night, we're going to call on you folks if you care to. We're not going to put you on the spot. But if you'd like to have a little anecdote or something like that to add to the conversation, we'd love to do that. What we try to do is we get representatives from each school. From Bristol Central, we have Mike G. Which year is G?
68.
68, so you were there from 60 to 68?
That's funny, but it's not funny.
I got stars in my ear. Why?
Greg Siogas, when you were there?
62 to 66.
62 to 66. And Tony kind of split it. He was there at St. Anthony's for a couple of years, and then went over to St. Again, what years were those?
I graduated in 67 from Central, so 63 to
Okay.
67.
And then at Eastern, we have Gary Palladino. What years?
59 to
59 to 63, and Bart Beardsley. What year is Bart?
64, 68.
Okay. So we have some representatives, so there's people here from early in the 60s and later in the 60s. So again, if you have some stories to tell, please do. What I wanted to do is start off tonight just to, with a question. Who was the sports writer? Crystal Price. No one got that wrong, did they? What I did is I was going through and I found a few of these, and Mike G was nice enough to bring in a scrapbook from the 60s, 62. I just happened to find one paper. First of all, look at the size of this thing. Your dog would be happy, right? It'd be terrific, you know? It's coming back.
Look at the prices.
What was the name of the column that he wrote? Sports Circles, there it is, right there, okay? And again, I'm just showing you, because look at the amount of ink that he had to have. I mean, it was amazing. And it happens to have someone else we lost, George Redmond. His picture's in there, okay? George Redmond, remember him? Okay, and of course, on the other side was the results of the high school soccer games and football games. Now, if you read the Bristol Press, now, you're lucky if you get and I'm not slighting anybody, so don't take any. You know. But what I'm saying is that now, if you get an article 2 days after the game, you're happy. Okay?
Still waiting to see the Central won the state championship this year.
That's right. That's right. They won the state championship. They didn't have it in the paper, did they? Yeah.
It's been in the Bristol edition.
The Bristol edition now we have a new thing. But again, I'm just showing you this because back then it was 3 or 4 articles a week. So that was the 60s. That was something that was great. And there might be some stories about the media. I thought of a lot of different topics that people could talk about, but it's open for anything. So what these people are going to do is try to spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes at the most, giving a couple stories so that we don't spend all the time with these guys, and we'll let you people add to the program right there. So, if I could, let me start with Greg, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You can tell the first story if you could.
Well, the first thing that hit me is when I first came in here tonight was that one of the heroes, and was actually a coach of mine when I was a kid, was Memorial Vero. And I used to go to watch him at St. Anthony's. My father would take me to all the games at the arena. Until I came in and saw that uniform over there, I said, now I can't worry. So I thought that I would speak, there are a lot of things that went on in our lifetimes when we were kids that aren't even possible today. They're almost impossible. There was a tournament called the Mac Malone Tournament up at Page Park, basketball, when I was in high school. And so there was a summer league that went on up there all summer long, and then they would pick a group of guys that were the quote-unquote all-stars and would play in this Mac Malone Tournament. Mac Malone Tournament drew the best players from around the state, from New Haven, from Hartford, Bridgeport, and they ran this tournament at Page Park under the lights, and you couldn't even get in Page Park because there were so many people there to watch that game. But the one thing that I remember that stands in my mind, when the game was over, it was a 90-degree day. Jack Carpenter ran the league actually. He'd come up to us and he'd say, "You want to go take a swim?" "Sure. Here's the key to go up to the pool." Now, where could we do this today? We could go into the pool at Page Park. We'd be diving off the high dive, diving off the small dive. You know, a bunch of guys in the pool, get out, go back and give Mr. Carpenter the key, and nothing more was thought of. The other story was, when I was in high school, we didn't have a gym. From 62 to 66, Bristol Central had this tiny little gym, probably the size of this room. At the Bulwark, yeah. And so we had to go and practice at Bristol Eastern on Mondays and on Thursdays. On Wednesdays, all three teams would practice in that little gym. It's hard to put the basketball team together with that kind of practice facility. And the fact that we'd have to go over to Eastern, who would kick our ass every single time we played them, and then we had to go over there and kick them out of the gym so we could actually have practice. But back then, there was no Route 84. And a lot of the teams that we played were Manchester, Wyndham. JV games would start at 6:30. Varsity games would start at 8 o'clock. We're out in Willimantic. No highway, so you figure it takes about an hour and 15 minutes to get home from there. So my mom, Italian, would make a big grinder for me. Usually it was eggplant, but sometimes it was cold cuts. Sometimes it was, you know, chicken parmesan, whatever. But Greg Fredette, who was a good friend of mine in high school, had to sit next to me all the time. Had to sit next to me, and I knew why and he knew why, but he had to sit next to me. So one day, we're on the bus, we're on our way to Willimantic, Mike Malillo jumps into the seat next to me. Frau looks at us, what the hell are you doing? So I'm going to sit here. He says, no you're not. They get in a fight in the bus, rolling around on the floor of the bus, so that they can sit next to me and share my grinder. Had nothing to do with basketball, all had to do with the grinder.
Who was your coach then, Mike?
Well, Bill McCooey was our coach till my junior year, and then Gene Zanke in our senior year. We weren't very good in our senior year. Junior year, we had a good team. I was the center in our senior year, so playing against Bristol Eastern at 6'5", 6'5", 6'3". It wasn't easy.
Great, thanks, Greg. Speaking of Wyndham, anybody remember that trip on the football bus at 10:30 in the morning?
Yep.
10:30 we played.
Yep.
Eddie Ferrigno was the coach at Wyndham. And because we played at night and they had to travel from Wyndham to Bristol at night and then go back home, he decided to play at 10:30 in the morning on Saturday. So we would have to get up and go there. It was an hour and a half anyway, right? Play down there. So he'd get you back.
And for all the years, I don't ever remember not playing against the Blazinski or Skoshenko.
Oh yeah, Suchenko especially. Yeah.
The family had to be 100 of them.
Like the Zajacs from there.
Zajac severity, right?
Let me
Exactly.
just add this, while Dave's talking about those trips to Wyndham. I brought with me a special memory that I want to contribute to the hall, because I remember those trips too. And it was in September 62, and we beat Wyndham. There's the ball. This is, well, 60 years old, right? Yeah, I want to make sure we don't lose this one, because this was a special day. 12-6 over Wyndham.
That was the first victory.
I want to thank for you. Because you were my role model. In '59, Dave was the captain on the football and basketball and baseball team, and I remember you wearing those cardigan sweaters, and you were really special for me as a 14-year-old.
Thank you very much.
I didn't mean to step my bond.
No,
I'll wait my turn.
we have the two representatives from the 65 team here. That was my first football game ever. I got Mike and Billy, and that was our first victory as well.
Well, I still keep in touch with Coach Duval, who lives in Colorado now. He's 84. He was 24 in I believe 62, not 17. But he still keeps in touch with me, and he coached at Columbia after Eastern, and then he went to Central Connecticut, and then he went out to Colorado, and he actually was a backfield coach for Nebraska in the Rose Bowl. Then he gave up football and he became a CEO of a petroleum company in California. And we brought buy just around. He's got 18 grandchildren. Very spiritual-minded guy, and a great memory. One quick story. I
I'm
shared.
going to call on Gary.
I read your book here. And Mike Thorne, without a doubt, two of the best football players ever to play at Bristol Eastern. Certainly in my 4 years. Jack was an all-stater in my mind. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but Him and Warren were fantastic. Coach Duval, I told him I was coming to talk to you about some of the things in the 60s, and I'm surprised these guys are here because you're 2-3 years old. It seemed like I don't know, I remember the 60s as well. Anyway, Coach Duval said, "I'll never forget that drill. We had bull in the ring where the players circled around, and he'd call out 2 names like Luzinski and Moore, and they'd go head on and see who could drive the other guy out of the ring." Well, he was a big believer in mental toughness, all right, dealing with uncomfortable feelings. And he said it took, as far as I was concerned, 4 years for me to really instill mental toughness, and that's when they beat Bristol Central finally after, I think, 5 years, 6 years. Anyway, he says, let me show you guys what mental toughness is all about. I'm going to call out a player, and I'm going to push him right out of this ring. And this is what it's going to be like, guys. So just take a good look at it. He calls on Mike Warren. Mike puts his head down. You know, he's got that pull back. He's trying to coach the ball out of the ring, on his back. He couldn't even get up. He says, I will never forget Mike Warren's toughness. And that's true. He was, God bless him. I know he's, he's dealing with his own health issues, but he was a heck of a player, a heck of a coach. And I'm sure this was a great team, these 2 guys playing together. But when they go, continue down. I'll stop for a
We'll
minute.
give you another
My brought some stuff with me that I kept in my drawer for, I believe, 60 years. First, I want to show you the forceful voice club shirt I wore. I got a better one for you because you're not going to believe this. I stole this jersey from someone else in here. Where did I get it? Somebody else stole it. I'll have to find it later. This is the Little League Cubs, 1957, playing against Tommy Chope, who's on the Indians. He hit 1 home run in Little Leagues in '57 against me. I hit 1 against him. So we only 2 home runs we ever hit in Little League.
Who was your coach, Gary?
Coach, I'll tell you who it was. We had Coach Pilot, Coach Carpenter, Little League for 2 years. Coach Watson was the all-star coach. Never forget the day he picked me up on Brook Street and said, we're going to Kinney Park in Hartford, and I want you to play against some better players, tougher competition. So we played against Bobby Knight, Eddie Griffin, Johnny Lee, and I realized I really stunk. I had to what I'm going to play. So that was a humbling experience. 1960, Coach Lug, American Legion.
Are they wool? Seriously, they're wool, right?
Program for Little League 1957. Got a lot of names, I'm sure everybody here.
So I told him to clean out his drawers.
I don't know. I saw the 67 jacket.
Yeah.
I got the 62 one. I don't know if that's yours. Phil, you might have the 62.
You got more
Is
stuff.
that yours over there? I don't know. This is mine. 60. Never wore it. We never used to in my closet. That's right, 60 years. Brand new. 1962. I have a feel this is Dave Mills' uniform at Bristol High. Or Albie Gursky, or Eddie Halo, I'm not sure. But this has got to be 7 years old. We got to find out. We got to find out who 65 is. Because that's a great gift.
He's only got 4 bags, don't worry.
This is my favorite, Bristol Boys Club, Maury Libero. Number 13, that's right.
They call it the Cubs.
You grew. That's Maury's shirt. Bristol Boys Club. I don't know if I got a uniform in it. These from 1961. Bristol Legion socks. This ball was signed by, 1969. In Yankee Stadium. Tommy Chope gave me this. We're going to watch him play left field. Mickey Mantle was in center field. That's amazing, right? We're the best. No question about it. You know, I can't tell you how proud I am and happy to see Coach Dick out. Because without Coach Dick out, we don't win the 74 state championship. against, that's right, against Kent. I brought this band, somebody gave it, I don't want to give it to me.
Let's get it off the wall.
This is the state championship, 74.
Yep.
All right, St. Paul.
Oh,
Thank you. You can have that, or you can have.
they were looking for that, Gary. I wrote out for Bob, some memories that, it would take me just too long. I don't want to dominate and talk long enough now. I want to just a copy of some great memories. One of them I listed is the West End. I'm so happy to see John here because it was you, there was Jimmy, Amesworth, Jimmy Wilson. Those were the guys. They were sat in the bleachers on third base at all those games in Western Field, and they just killed our opponents, especially West Hartford. Am I right or wrong? Yeah. And I listed a lot of other people, in my handout there for the hall. I want to stop now because I can really. I want to.
We'll come back to you.
Come back to me because I want to share a couple of stories about Coach Vieira's experience, Coach Porky Vieira when he was at St. Anthony's with Coach Longo. And I'm sure Coach Libero will remember some of these stories about Coach Longo. Legends. More material. Right? Sorry it took so long.
No, no problems at all. It was terrific.
I wrote out, this is all about, it's not about achievements from my standpoint. I believe 77.6, this is about relationships. My two precious gifts are positive memories. Chuck McCarthy, every time I saw him, I wanted to play harder. Positive memories and loyal relationships. It's so nice to know that 1959, I looked up to you, and look who we are today. Still with us.
Now you look at that.
Right place, right time.
G?
Yeah, that's a tough act to follow. I do remember you speaking at a banquet and busting out things like that, so I brought my jacket. I knew it wasn't the same year as yours.
Oh, that's great.
But I also brought a binder from the Bristol Press. If you get a chance, this is the summer of 1962. Now, this is the year that you guys went to Keene and played in the New England Finals, and they got beat by Somerville. But the stuff in there is incredible. They've got park department basketball. They've got Pony League baseball. Every local sport is covered in there. And then you go through the ads for the food and the clothing, and you see the prices. And they have the obituaries, and they have the weddings and the engagements. It's a treasure. It really is. I came about it. My brother worked for the water department, and he happened to be downstairs in the press one day, and he saw these volumes, and he and I are both, sports nuts and trivia nuts. So he grabbed this one. That's 1962. He got 1963, and he got 1969. And they're so damn heavy, I couldn't have brought all of them, but I knew that 62 would resonate in this room because of some of the people that are here. It's incredible. I had it open to the page where I hit 2 home runs. Everybody flipped it over, so you get what you get. But please, if you do look at it, be careful because the pages are kind of fragile. Okay? Gary was mentioning the Muzzy Field and Legion baseball, and I just want to go through a summer night when I was 12 years old in Bristol. Play a baseball game at McCabe Waters, Fraser Field, okay? Finish the game, run down to Carvel and get an ice cream. Finish your ice cream, and then run down the rest of the street to Muzzy Field. The lights are just starting to go on for the second game of the doubleheader. And I'm looking at these guys, and I remember that lineup like it was yesterday. Danny Harrigan behind the plate. Billy Greger at first, Eddie Scotch-Listen at second, Phil Manarino at short, Gary at third. The outfield was Tully, Chope, and usually Eddie Ginter. Sometimes that other position was mixed up. The pitchers were Bozak, Pete White. I mean, it was just, that was my dream. when I went there and watched those guys play, I said to myself, I'm gonna do that someday. And that motivated me through all the years that I, played baseball and tried to be on that team and be part of what they were. Another thing that I remember very well, and again includes Muzzy Field and Rappin and some of the other guys my age might remember it. The first year of midget football, we didn't have midget football until 1963, the fall of '63. We had a touch football league in the grammar schools. And I want to tell you, that league was a tough league. There was a lot of hoodlums in that league that wanted to take your head off. And we had a great time doing that. But all of a sudden, 1963 came, and guys like Jerry Burns and Armin Chenier and Roland Dumont, they just went head over heels to start this midget football. It was just so exciting. But we had a parade. The day of the first game, we had a parade. We started down around Pete's Luncheonette. Packers, we had green. Giants had blue. Redskins had red. And the Browns had brown. And we marched from the west end all the way down Park Street to Muzzy Field. And we had a doubleheader. And that was the opening day of midget football in Bristol, 1963.
Do you remember any of the coaches then?
Oh, God, yeah. I was just going to say that. Well, my coaches on the Packers were Bill Hine was the head coach. We had Bob Karen, Franklin Burrow, and a guy named Bob LaBelle. And I remember like it was yesterday. And we won the championship.
One of the coaches, Jimmy Nacera, was a coach in midget football.
Jimmy was Giants, right?
Giants.
Bob Garrett's right there.
It was just such an exciting day for Bristol, exciting day for us, and the pageantry was just incredible. So, that was a second thing. The third thing that I remember, and this is, I'm sure a lot of guys share this same, memory with me. How about a Saturday at the Bristol Boys Club? Down there in the morning, playing in the Biddy League, running down to Pete's for a hot dog and a chocolate milk. You didn't even need $1. The hot dogs were a quarter. The chocolate milk might be 15 cents. And if you were with Nick Urso, he always had money. You might be able to get a prize. Nick would always buy us a prize. But otherwise, you had to settle for a hot dog and a chocolate milk. Then you run back to the club, and now it's open gym. There's 100 guys in the gym trying to play 3-on-3 and 4-on-4, and you're crashing into guys, and who cares? You're having the time of your life. But the best part was going balls ass naked in that pool after you played basketball and swam, and then put your clothes on and went home, and your mother was so as again, you better.
Bristol Press covered that too.
Never thought twice. You mentioned that to somebody now, and hey, look at you people from out
So you get arrested?
Yeah, you get arrested. It's unbelievable. No one believes. I'm going to quickly shift, and I'm going to make this extremely short because I just want to mention some of my teammates who are no longer here. Harry Harold, football, basketball, baseball. I played with him. Joe Barney, football. Vito Hernandez, Southside School, Bracket Playground, Red Sox from Cape Waters, Little League, high school football, basketball, baseball, then American League. I mean, did anybody ever say a bad word about Vito Hernandez? And by the way, his name is not Vito. Okay? His real name is Wilfredo. And his nickname used to be Pito. That's what his family called him. And somebody heard Pito and turned it into Vito. I don't know any Puerto Ricans named Vito. I know a lot of Italians named Vito, but I don't really, and he became Vito. And the rest is history. But that's another story.
He ties you in dope.
Yeah, okay. My basketball team at Bristol Central, Greg Hagan, who was also a state championship golfer. Rick Cross, who I think pound for pound, maybe except for Kevin Burns of Eastern, was probably the best football player that I ever saw. Never came off the field. Offense, defense, special teams, everything. Rick never came off the field. Tough as nails and extremely competitive. Craig Yard, my teammate on the Packers, I asked the Yardy, because he was the tallest guy in the team. I could see him, I chucked one. Yardy caught him, we won the championship. And I also played high school basketball with Craig. Ernie Conrad, a friend of mine, and Davey Raps, a real good friend, came down from Massachusetts, played football and baseball with us, and also played American Legion ball. And finally, my good friend Phil Nestico. Phil and I played Little League baseball together. Excuse me. We did everything in the neighborhood: wiffle ball, you know, fast pitch tennis ball, baseball, football. Played cards in his backyard with Al Mancini and his brother. I mean, it's like a scene from The Sopranos. I just did everything with Phil. Unfortunately, his life was cut short in Vietnam, but just wanted to mention him. And coaches that I had, incredible coaches. I was so blessed. I had Benny Brzezicki for a coach in the Pony Leagues. And Benny was, I don't know if he got away with some of the things he used to say now. Benny had the thing about certain nationalities. The kids who went to the Lutheran school were Lutherans. If you went to St. Anthony's or you were Italian, you were the Italians. And, you know, basically our team, Benny coached the Boy Scout team in what was then known as the Junior Pony League. And basically our team came from kind of like one neighborhood area. I went to Southside, then there was St. Anthony's, O'Connell, St. Stan's, Lutheran. But we never had anybody from St. Anne's. And I said to, you know, Coach Brzezicki, I said, how come you don't draft any guys from St. Anne's? He goes, yeah, those Frenchmen, he goes, you draft me and they quit halfway through the year and get a job. So we never had anybody from St. Anne's.
Steal.
That's right.
That was a signal. That was the signal.
What? And we cannot steal.
I batted after the Polish Rocket, Danny Karwowski, who was the fastest guy in Bristol. And every time Danny got on, I had to take 2 pitches, so Danny could steal second and third. God's honest truth. And that's what Benny did. Oh, take off, Karwowski. They haven't caught you yet. Go ahead. 3:30 in the afternoon, we had batting practice for a 6 o'clock game. I said, Coach, what's going on? He goes, that's when I got out of work. So that's when we met for batting practice and ground ball. He was unbelievable. Coach Redmond and Coach Bates, 2 central figures in my life. Coach McCooey, Coach Castelline at Bristol Central, who the sun rose and set on him as far as I was concerned. Okay, just 2 quick stories about Coach Bates and Coach Coach Redmond, and I'll get out of here. We're playing West Hartford in the American Legion, and they had a big first baseman by the name of Bob Stitch. Good player, excellent player. Went to UConn, was outstanding. But Bob had a habit. He was a left-handed first baseman. Every time they throw over there, he used to whack our guys from Bristol. So Coach Bates was getting upset. He wasn't real happy about this. So he says to our first baseman, the mild-mannered Mike Warner, he says, Mike, when they throw over there, he said, I want you to whack Stitch. Mild-mannered guy in the mound, Billy Meade from St. Paul. Billy lobs it over first. Mike love taps Stitch. Bates' smoke is coming out of his ears now. Throw it over there again. Throws it over there. Warner taps him again. Love tap. So now Bates says, timeout. Looks down the end of the bench. We got a 15-year-old who's dying to get into the game. Jimmy Ziotis. And never passed up a fight. So coach says to him, Jimmy, get in there. You're going to throw it over there and you're going to whack him. Jimmy goes in. Throw comes over. Boom! He hits Stitch in the head. Full force. The stands empty, the bench is empty, Stitch's mother is out there. And Jimmy was right in the middle of it. You know, that was Coach Bates. We did stuff like that with him. And lastly, as a Coach Redmond story, I could spend the whole night on Coach Redmond and Coach Bates. And Bob Fallon, I already checked for the authenticity of this story, so I hope it's true, but I know it is. We got a star running back on our team. Just ask him, Dave Rapone. He'll tell me. Oh, I got 1,000 yards that year. And yeah, okay. Right. Rap's struggling in geometry.
Struggling?
Let me tell the story about it. So he goes to Coach Redmond and he says, Coach, I'm having a little trouble in geometry. And Coach Redmond says, who's the teacher? He says, Mr. Fallon. So Mr. Redmond, thinking that, you know, Coach Fallon is involved in sports and coaches basketball and golf, and he'll be receptive. So he goes to Bob Fallon and he says, Coach, He says, Rap struggling in geometry? And Bob says, yeah, he's having a hard time. And Yash says, well, what's he got? And Bob says, a 50. And George says, well, can't you give him 10 points so we can get 60 to pass? And Fallon goes, I already gave him 30. I'll stop there, I gotta leave the more things. And I got a co-story with Bart later, so.
All right, Mark, you're up.
Well, another tough act to follow. So, and I thought about, talking about games and things like that. Then I decided to talk about, because the room is filled with a bunch of people that are still coaching or have coached. And I thought of a story about Coach Punzel. And a lot of times when people think Punzel, they think of all the odd stuff that he did. However, I'm going to share a situation when I was a junior in high school. It was the beginning of practice for the new year. And I was, I was on the second team, and Bobby Jones we were practicing the press. And so, I'll stand up there, kind of show you. So I'm taking the ball out of bounds, and my feet are flat-footed like this. So I go like this, and Bobby moves back, and Punzel yells at him, time out, always capable. Time out, what are you doing? Why are you stepping back? He goes, because he's going to throw long. And Bobby says, he can't throw long, look at his feet. So Bobby says, he can throw long, he can hit the other wall down the other end. Punzel said, he can't do that. So they give me the ball, and I throw it, and I hit the wall. Punzel said, on the right side of the wall. So, the point is that Punzel put that out in his head, that little tidbit that I could throw the ball like that. Because, and Bobby knew, because we've already played high school baseball and Legion together, so he knew that I had a strong arm. So now we go to the first playoff game after 18 games that you play during the regular season. And I hadn't played in the games. It's 64-62. And my skill, basically, at that time, is I could shoot. So Punzel calls timeout with 2 seconds. We're down by the 2 points. Calls me from the bench. So now, I think I'm going to get a shot, And so he goes, what I want you to do is you throw the ball from this end down to that end. I want you to hit the backboard. And I'm going to have Eddie Whitehead getting under the basket like he's going to catch it. And as the ball's in the air, I'm going to have him run to the foul line. Shoulders facing the basket. The ball is going to go off the backboard to him, and he'll have a direct shot. So, like, no pressure. So, and oddly enough, I'm taking the ball out, and the guy playing me gives me enough space. And truthfully, I did move this leg back a little because I knew I had to throw it a little further. So I threw it, hit the backboard, Eddie did exactly what he did. The ball came, because it's so hard, came right through his hands. But he had that thought from 8 weeks prior. And he utilized it somehow in the game, and it almost worked. And it's interesting, even guys on our team, and people when I was leaving go, nice shot, you almost made it. And even if I did, it wouldn't count. And one of the other story, my first year when I was 15 playing Legion, first game I pitched, Friday nights you play double headers, as we all know. And we played Rockville in the first game. And the second game, we played New Britain. And so it was like 11 o'clock, and the game was still going on. And so I went in to pitch, and I pitched 4 innings, and the game got over like a quarter after 12. Okay, and the reason why I'm telling you this story is that was the game. The next day, the people that lived in that area in Lizzie Field went to City Hall, and that was the game that changed the ordinance that made you couldn't start an inning after 11 o'clock. So pretty interesting little tip there. And while I'm up, I might as well, let's tell her a little story and get that.
All right, this is, I went to Southside School, Bart went to Stafford School. The Southside is where the Board of Ed is now, not the one up on Ward Street. And we had a pretty bad baseball team. We were 0-9. We had a lot of close games. We had two real good pitchers, Mark Susi and Joey D'Amato, and they used to keep us close all the time, but we couldn't hit. We couldn't hit the floor if we fell out of bed. We were terrible. So we had a lot of close games, and we didn't beat. We were 0-9. Now we're going to go face the powerhouse Stafford, 9-0 at Page Park in the final game of the year. They had already clinched the Grammar School Championship, so we were all fired up. Yeah, let's go beat Stafford, like we thought we had a chance. Well,
I'm not here.
really, Tom?
Your time's up.
So it's 2-1 in the 5th inning. If you remember those days, those games were 5 innings long, grammar school games. And they were spikes surrendered, we wore sneakers. We used to call it the 5-inning sneaker league. And it's the 5th inning, and we're winning 2-1 by some miracle. Okay, Bart was pitching for Stafford, and he never lost in those days. And they get a runner on base, Timmy Thompson. Now, Timmy was a fast runner, very aggressive kid. But in the course of the game, there was a guy in the stands who kept complaining about the umpire, what a rotten umpire he was. So the umpire says, "You think you can do better? Come on down here." It was Timmy's father. I didn't know this at the time, okay? So I'm behind home plate, I'm catching, because we had nobody else to catch. And Timmy takes off for second base to steal with the tie and run. I throw it on a second, and he overslides the base. He probably would have been safe anyway, but he overslid the base, obviously. And his father calls him out. And they begin to go berserk on the field. Timmy starts going after his father screaming at Timmy screaming at his father, they're going crazy. But that was the last out of the game, and we won the game. Bart will finish the story, because it gets better.
Yeah, so as Mike was saying, Timmy and his father both had pretty decent tempers. So they were really going at each other, and I mean, we came off the field and they were still there. And we looked back and they were still there. So Timmy and I, even to this day, are really good friends. So after the game, his parents walk away and he's still at the field. So he says to me, "I'm going over your house." I said, "Well, that's fine." It was a Friday, I think we played on a Friday. So he ended up staying over at my house for 2 days. So they didn't go home. And I mean, that's Timmy. So the interesting part of that, when he finally went home, he was still pretty irate at his dad. So he stayed out in the tent in the backyard for 2 days. So it took him 4 to 5 days kind of to get over this thing. But because Mike and I just recently talked on this, and it's kind of like he said, I was safe. I know. And his father could no longer tell
All right, Tony.
I'm going back to elementary school. I was in 7th grade. We were playing O'Connell School for the championship. Coach Valerio was our coach. And Coach had a way with names. Announcing whatever. For example, Pat Bozello was Pincello. I was often mistaken for Joe Raponi, not Dave. Raponi. So we're playing the game, and we're up. We're up on 1 point. It's a close game. We're playing O'Connell for the championship at Mary A. Calvin School. Coach calls timeout. He says, "Don't shoot the ball." We got the lead. Just pass the ball on. They got to foul us. So we're working the ball around. All of a sudden, Bill Salvatore's in the corner, all alone, decides to take a shot. Well, he shoots the ball, hits the top of the backboard, bounces off. And as he did that, Coach, I'm on the bench at that time, Coach got so mad, he went, "Frank Avila!" I didn't think nothing of it, so As he did that, he pulled out his sock. Half the sock stayed in the shoe. The other part came up his leg. So I'm going, we don't have anybody named Frank Avila. Who's Frank Avila? So it dawned on me. There was 2 prominent dentists in town. Dr. Frank Avila was one of them. On Riverside Avenue, I can see it because I went to him working Bristol Savings Bank. And the other one was Dr. Salvatore, Bill Salvatore's father. So Coach must have got confused and just said Frank Avila instead of saying Salvatore. So the end result was O'Connell got the rebound, and somehow we fouled Recolaitis, who lived across the street from me. I never heard the end of the story all the way through. And Russ made the 2 shots. We lost by 1 point.
Thanks to Frank Avila.
Thanks, Frank. And to this day, Frank always would razz Bill Salvatore, why did you take that shot? Why did you take that shot? So Salvatore goes, who fouled Recolaitis?
Franny?
Franny. Well, that's what, according to Bill Salvatore. So I don't want to get in trouble with that. Another story. I was in grammar school for this one. And I used to, like Mike was saying, I used to go to all the St. Anthony high school games, as many games as I could, the Polish club, away games, if my uncle or father would take me. I just loved going to the games. And we're playing Litchfield. I believe it's a tournament game. And we're getting cremated. We're down by 18 points, middle of the 3rd quarter. And Coach Longo was the coach. And all of a sudden, Johnny Swickless, from Terryville, went to St. Anthony's. He gets hot. He puts 5 jump shots in a row from the same spot. All of a sudden, the other team calls timeout. There's all this commotion in the bleachers. People are moving around. From the top of the bleachers, here comes Stevie Venturo. Runs out onto the court, kisses Swickless, and runs back up into the bench. And then Jerry Legassi made 2 foul shots. I think it was in overtime. I can't remember exactly, but we won the game. From 18 points down in the middle of the 3rd period. And then Legassi won it. Another story, and I was a freshman. I was just happy to suit up for the St. Anthony's High School varsity game. And, you know, the games were at the Polish Club. We used to dim all the lights. We had the nice gold silk uniforms, sweatpants, tops with the Crusader flap in the back. And the cheerleaders had the big hoop or ring with the streamers with blue and gold. We had the blue and gold ball, and usually the captains were in the front, and then right down the line, seniors, juniors, and stuff. So I was at the end. Now all the lights are dim, and then they're playing the song When the Saints Go Marching In. I believe it was Dave Powers, and he was the captain at the time. Well, he goes through, well, he caught his neck. If 3 or 4 guys fall down on top of the spotlight right on. Coach Long goes, you'll never run through the hoop. Then we were talking about Mr. Vieira.
Oh, jeez.
We had Mr. Vieira was our social studies teacher.
Oh, jeez.
In 6th grade. So, besides social studies, he would take us, the nuns would let him go, take us to the gym for gym class. Boys Club. Boys Club. And so we had to walk across the street, go over the bridge, go behind Vita, which was St. Anthony's High School, and then there was an opening in the fence and we can go in from the back entrance into the club. Now we're only supposed to be there about an hour and 15 minutes max. Because the nuns, they had to have religion. Everything was certain times for certain subjects. So we're in the club, we're having a good time. And we're looking at the watch. I says, geez, been here over an hour. It's getting late. So I says, Mr. Vieira, I says, you know, you gotta start heading back. You know, it's getting late. Don't worry about it, we'll stay a little longer. Now it's almost 11 o'clock. He calls Eddie Soyak over. Whispers something to him, gives him some money. All of a sudden, we're still playing. Soyak comes back. He's got 2 hot dogs and Pete's. Coach was waiting for the Pete's to open up at 11 o'clock to get the 2 hot dogs. Now the nuns are going crazy because we're not back. Ready to call the cops on us. You know, we're the kids. They're not back at school yet. But that was a Porky story. We had some great coaches, like Mike was saying. I mean, Frank Longo, Mr. Vieira, my JV coach right here, Mario Lavero. I had Gerard Kuchar as a freshman basketball coach, and Tom Deneau. I mean, we had well-known coaches right through high school. And it was just a pleasure playing for these guys. And like Mike said, when you see that uniform, and I was at the grammar school, and I wanted to run through the hoop like Dave Powers did, but not catch my neck on it, and be part of that. Unfortunately, St. Anthony's shut down the sports when I was a sophomore. After my sophomore year, I went over to Central for 2 years. And I'll just tell a couple Mr. Redmond stories. And Tom Pons was a real good soccer player. And he had an injury, and I think it was his hamstring or quad. And Mr. Redmond had a whirlpool in his office. So Tom had last period off, so he went up to Mr. Redmond. He says, Coach, I got a real big soccer game today, and I hurt myself in the last game. Do you mind if I can come in there and use the whirlpool? So Mr. Redmond looks up at him. Hey, Ponzi, let's get a couple of things straight. There are no big soccer games. Get the hell out of my office. There was one more. Now, of course, we had the pool at the Boulevard, which was our high school. And for some reason, we're doing racing dives in the pool. So I was in lane 2. Everett Lyons was in lane 1. Josh is over here. I forgot who the rest of the people were on the blocks. So the signal was ready, set, go. And you jumped in, did your racing dive. Well, Everett went in on set. And Josh wasn't ready. And he did a belly flop. And Mr. Redmond got completely drenched from head to toe. And I can't even tell you what he said. So, because we all laughed, the next period that we had in his class, he goes, you thought it was funny, huh? Everybody in the deep end, I want you to bob for 40 minutes. Luckily, I could swim. The non-swimmers were fortunate because they were down a little further where they could just about touch the bottom. So we're bobbing, and I'm going on my back a little bit. All of a sudden, you see guys drifting over to the side to grab the rail, you know. And there's Mr. Redmond stopped. So he had to get back in the water. And then he finally realized that somebody might drown here. So he stopped doing that. The last one, the soccer games were played adjacent to a football practice field. I was a left wing, and back then we didn't have any lines people running the line. So if the ball went out of bounds, you were the closest to the ball, you went to go get it. So we're playing, I forgot, I think it was Malone. Ball was out of bounds. Not even 2 feet from Mr. Redmond. Oh, jeez. I gotta go over here and get the ball. So I'm running over to get the ball. Just as I bend down to pick up the ball, boom! Mr. Redmond kicks it right across the boulevard. I said, Mr. Redmond, we got a game. He says, get that pansy ball off my foot. I said, gee. Yeah, he didn't like soccer. Not like soccer.
That's fine.
Jack, we didn't mean to put you at that table over there. I mean, he's representing St. Paul's over there. We got St. Paul's open, and I'm sure that you know, we wanted to include them as part of the group here, so we put Jack in the corner over there. So the secretary, no, it's very- So Jack, would you add a few things if you could about the St. Paul?
I got the message, Dave. So, nothing unusual. You did it to me at Eastern for 30 years. Thank you. First, I just wanted to say, after Bob Callett's introduction about all the people in the 50s, I just want to thank you. I'm going to go home tonight and shoot myself. And Dave, thank you for having a panel of the greatest athletes of the 60s here to talk. I'm proud to be a part of that. Just for the record, my Hall of Fame career is highlighted probably about my 1.725 scoring average in basketball and my 235 average in baseball. In fact, my senior year in the summer, played for Don Titus on the Eagles, led off for the Eagles, played center field, and the only sad part about that was when Don recruited me to play for the Eagles, I had to then tell Jimmy Bates that I could not be his bat boy on the Legion. So it was you know, a mixed blessing.
Jack won the batting title that year. I
What
don't
was
know.
that?
You won the batting title that year.
Maybe. I'm writing that down.
You'll read that in the trip.
Yeah. I'll keep it short because obviously St. Paul is just a footnote to this 60s reunion. We didn't start, St. Paul didn't open until 1966, and it started with just a freshman class, so my group was in there first, and then every year a class got added. So we didn't even play any varsity sports until 1968, 69, and that was like a 2/3, 1/3. We started the year playing some JV games in football and basketball, and then went to all varsity in our senior year. We did have some very good athletes. Mike mentioned Bill Meade. Bill Meade was, I think, second team All-State for Class N in basketball. We had John Dunn, who was still I think, the fastest athlete in Bristol, at least as far as the 100-yard dash went. Now I don't know how that would translate to the 100 meters, but just a quick story about John Dunn. He played halfback on the football team, and I played fullback. I could have played halfback, but he was the fastest kid in Bristol, so I was stuck at fullback. And back in those days, coaches didn't really care whether you survived practice or not, so we used to run something like 40-yard sprints at the end of practice to see, you know, how far you could go until you died. And every 10th sprint, Coach Pellegrinelli, who really was an outstanding football coach, would announce that the winner of this sprint will then be able to sit out the next 2 sprints. Now for the first 9 sprints, I'm kicking his butt. I'm beating him, which is kind of unusual because he's about, oh, I don't know, 20 yards faster than I am in the 40-yard dash, but I'm winning and he's just sort of coasting along. And then when he makes the announcement, John then proceeds to win the sprint, and he sits down, and then he sits down again, and of course on his way home, he has a cigarette. It was just disgusting. You know, it's like, wow, what a waste. But, oh, I'm sorry, God bless you, John. John died a few years ago, but he was a really good guy, but he wasn't in the best shape all the time. That was one story. We did have some incredible coaches at St. Paul. We had Don Perno as our first basketball coach, Al Pellegrinelli as our first football coach, and Tony Lodovico was the first soccer coach. And interestingly enough, Tony Lodovico...
Something. You have no idea. You think flag football is just a bunch of guys running around tugging at belts. This was top level, high level stuff. And you heard the names before, Dennis Shermahorn, Ricky Smalls, Mike Moore, Charlie Cross, Tank Valentine. These guys were football players. And the flag football was football. Billy Atkinson, one of my teammates on there, Rapp was on those teams. And to have those Central and Eastern guys together in that league, which was ultra, ultra competitive, and Rick Gross was our leader. And nobody could lead the team like Rick, believe me when I tell you. But the chemistry and the togetherness, Mike Moore would mention that all the time. He would say, I've never been so proud of being on a team as being on that team, because it was all a mixture of all Bristol schools. So just want to throw that in there, and how proud we were to be Bristol.
One guy that hasn't been mentioned tonight that, in my mind, was one of the best players that ever came out of Bristol Central was George Benoit. George Benoit was doing the Euro step in 1963 before it was even invented. Never got called for travel. Never. And you know, you talk about how we got along with a guy like George. Well, I was only a sophomore, he was a senior. And when I got into a varsity game, Coach McCooey made no bones about telling me, and everyone else that was in that game, you passed to George. Because George was you know, near records all the time. He was going to score 40 in a game, or he was coming close to 1,000 points, or whatever the record was. And we just accepted it. You know, it was his day, it was his time to shine, and we were going to have our turn. And you never go home and told your parents about that, you know, to try to stir up a bee's nest. No, George Benoit was the best player at Bristol Central. We all accepted it, and we knew it.
You know, on that note, no one mentioned 1962 Eastern Central basketball. That was probably the best year for high school basketball in Bristol outside of any state championship teams. And that's the year Gary Palladino and Terry Burke and Gregor and Della Bennett and Penicello went 18-0 or 20-0.
19-1, we lost to Connor.
Yeah, but in the regular season, you went undefeated, and Central went undefeated with Benoit, who was only a sophomore at the time.
Yeah, Howie Bussey was on that team.
Howie Bussey, Artie Whitehead, Ray Gagnon, and Bernie Cohn. But Central's only losses that season, lost 2 games that season in the regular season, and they were both to Easter. And then that Central team had to play Hartford Public in the first tournament, a game at Central, Connecticut. Hartford Public had Eddie Griffin, Bruce Maddox, Pat Burke.
Stan Ball.
And Bruce Maddox. That was, they probably won. That team went on to beat Buckley and Gene Riley. That team won the state tournament. But, you know, those two, that year was just a great year for high school basketball, 1962.
The other great aspect of what you're saying is, every game was sold out. Today, Notre Dame gets about 150 people. It was 1,500 people. They were turning people away.
When did you have to get there for the game? You had to get there for the beginning of the JV game.
Thanksgiving football went 5,000 in '61. There's 5,000 people there. We played West Hartford down in Phil. Remember, we have 2,500 people in Muncie-Field. I don't think they're going to see that anymore.
I remember going from the directing Monahan League, and I wanted to dash up and watch the Second American Legion game.
Yeah.
And I had to park way the hell down the street, and I couldn't find a seat for the second game. Yeah. I mean, that's the way the Legion grew.
You talked about McLone. Obviously, when I played then, but remember the crowds you'd get at McLone?
Oh, they were amazing.
You know, you get 500 people around the Page Park Alley with those tin backboards. They were great. I was a great shooter then.
There's not a better sports town in the state.
You guys are the best
I've been
players
in every town in the state, not there. I've heard it all. But Bristol, special. You talk about Rockwell Park. You know, there's so many places where we could play as kids. And being influenced by people like Jimmy Nacera. I mean, I remember going to the barbershop in Forestville. And all they talk about is sports. Everybody was into the sports world. I'm in Sarah's barbershop, and I talk about names. Oh my God, coaches struggling with names. Coach Punzo, he called everybody honey call. I remember I was 14 years old playing JV basketball. At the end of the bench, I'm a freshman, and he said, "Honey call, get in again." And I won at a sport table. I was waiting for him to say honey call. Anyway, we had that broke his ankle, Jack, remember he broke his ankle? He's telling the kid to run it off. Joe Kelly, yeah, he said, Coach, I gotta get water, I'm really dry. We don't drink water on this team. I'm not kidding you. This was about 5 minutes later. He collapses, falls down, goes Duval, carries him to the shower, sits with him on the floor in the shower. Luckily, he didn't die of dehydration. I mean, Coach talks about sharing ice cubes. I must have the record for eating the most grass, just to keep my mouth, you know, so saliva. I mean, we're talking about abuse. You know, motivating in those days, certainly in the 40s and 50s, you know, going back to Lombardi, was fear. Fear was the motivator, right? You talk about Coach Perno. I saw him rip a shirt right off a player one time. Joe Riley, South Catholic, Bobby Levine, he took his shirt and ripped it right off his and Coach Vieira loves to tell the stories about when he was good friends with, I don't think many people in Bristol realize he was very good friends with Claire B. from LIU, who was who won the national championship at LIU in the 40s. And Louis Conisacca from St. John's and Lapchak. I mean, they were pretty close. They'd go to camps together. Coach Longo knew the game. All right? At one camp in New York, Coach B told me was that he wanted to demonstrate how big the target was. The rim is 18 inches in diameter. The ball's 9, put 3 balls actually through the basket. It's a big hole. I had 6 kids in there at one time, 7-year-old kids. It's a huge target. So he breaks the brim and he puts it over his head in the camp to demonstrate how big the target is. And he brings it down into his chest. And then he realizes the net's still on there. He's caught in there, and he starts talking. No one's trying to help him to laugh, so he's got the rim around his chest and the net around his neck, and he's talking. After that, he's demonstrated. This is a true story. Coach B told me, can you imagine telling 200 kids how to put a jock strap on? That's what he was telling the kids. This is the correct way. He tries to put it on his trips and falls on the floor. He was a character. He had Mikey Bogustowski carry a bowling ball, big bowling ball, from his store, sports store, to the Polo Club one day. And Mike's carrying this ball up Main Street, up to the Polo Club. And as soon as they got there, Mike said to the coach, Coach, why am I carrying this ball anyway? He says, I just want you to know all the weight you carry, how it feels, you know, to carry all that weight. He throws the ball in the air. He walks home. He was a character. I had a lot of respect for him. But I remember those lights at the Polo Club and the spotlight coming down on Coach Libero and all those great players. Swerkless, Berlinski was a great player. Brother Norman played hundreds of games one-on-one with him. Rockinell had a 2-hand set shot at Callan School. Bristol was we were so fortunate at Page Park. Look what we could do. Lights at a basketball court. How many cities had that? Page Park for softball, baseball. We had Muzzy Field. We had the Polish Club. We had the Armory. 2 boys clubs in one town. Are you kidding? I mean, that to me, a lake to fish at. You know, and it just goes on and on. Great athletic facilities when the schools were built. So I always thought he was just a fortunate guy, little kid, to be in the right place at the right time. Bob Watson, you know, was underrated. We had Bob Watson, Jumpin' Joe Hudson, right? Mm-hmm. Phil Lewis, Eddie and Art Whitehead, all right? Those guys. Now, how many other black guys you can remember in the 60s in Bristol? Anybody throw a name out?
Joe Hudson.
Bobby Jones in the 60s.
Phil Lewis.
Phil Lewis, I mentioned Phil.
Doug Jackson.
Doug Jackson's father.
Terry Burke.
All right.
Terry Burke.
Terry Burke. Terry Burke's the first All-State at Bristol East in 1962. He was All-State with Eddie Griffin, Jackson from Cross, Griffin from Public, Jackson from Cross, Gene Riley, one of the greatest of all time, from Buckley. Joe Tonelli from Notre Dame, who hired me, Notre Dame West Haven, great player, all ACC second baseman at the South Carolina, and Terry Burke. Are you kidding me? That was one heck of a team. And speaking of great players, Phil Metarino and Don Tynes are 2 of the best second basemen I've ever played with. They had tremendous hands, tremendous teammate. And you want to ask Don Titus about something about Bristol sports, he's the guy. And Bill Mariano. And Tommy Dick out
You're
there.
getting some evil looks from that side.
You're a lot younger than me.
Bob Call's got a story.
I couldn't hit.
Rick O'Brien wanted to be here tonight, but he's out in California visiting his daughter Megan. And Rick was, as you know, a great basketball player during the 60s, lefty, went out to play at Assumption. So he just asked me to share this with the group. It's a short message. He said, Bob, as I got older, I got to appreciate Vinnie Punzo a lot more. He was sandwiched between Bert Carlson and Jimmy Bates. His first year, he took Bob Lindsay, Paul Reamer, and Jim Kane to the state quarterfinals. The following year, we made the tournament. Jack Dickow, Mike Lowry, John Pecky, etc. The next 2 years were my class and yours. The 66 team, we were 18-3 with 5 seniors, Archambault, Bishop, Kane, Casper, and me. The 67 team went 17-2 with Bobby Jones, Eddie Whitehead, Bill Turley, Jim Ginty, Billy McCabe, and Gary Dubnansky. So 35-5 over 2 years with different starters. He had good teams after that too. And then he says, as a note, he said Dave Fischon would have started at most, if not all the schools in the conference, if he had elected to play basketball. But that baseball thing seemed to work out for him, and he said he just wishes he could have been here and wishes everybody the best.
Nice.
So,
I'd just like to tell a quick story about Terry Burke. I was manager of the 62 basketball team at Bristol Eastern, and Terry was the greatest player ever, and I was probably the worst athlete that ever existed. But Terry says to me one day, would you like to play one-on-one with me before practice? And I says, yeah. He says, I'll give you 14 points and a ball, and in a game of 15, but you got to win by 2. So he says, that's a good deal. All I got to do is score a point to win. So he says, what do you want to put on the game? I says, $5? He says, sure. Well, when the game was over, I lost 16-14. And then he says to me, at the end of practice, he says, how are you getting home? I says, I'm going to call my parents. He says, no, you're not. He says, we're going to get in my car, we're going to go up to Burger Chef, and we're going to have supper on you. That was the kind of guy that Terry was. Terry, in my mind, is a true hero as far as Bristol goes. He was probably the premier basketball player ever. Now, there's another part of that story. I've been keeping in contact with Terry by phone. And Terry's a very outstanding religious person. One night he's talked to me, and I lost my wife just about 5 years ago. He says, how are you doing without Donna? And I said, well, it's hard sometimes, good and bad. He said, well, Con, you got to remember that when you pass away, you're going to go to heaven, and you're going to be there with Donna, body and soul together again. He says, now that's a nice thought. He says, you know what? When I die, he says, I'm going to go to heaven, and I'm going to have both my legs back, and I'm going to be completely healed. So with that, I says to him, well, I can one-upmanship. For the people that don't know, I don't see with my left eye since I've been 3 years old. And I said, well, you know, Terry, I'm going to have my sight back in my left eye as well. And there was dead silence at the other end of the phone. Dead silence. I expected him to say, oh yeah, of course. He says, Tom, he says, I got some real bad news for you. He says, you still won't be able to beat me one-on-one.
Great guy.
Don?
I just want to tell Mikey G, I went to St. Anne's and I started work in the 3rd grade. I do have a question for these guys though.
That's great.
The teammates today, professional, there's a lot of jealousy with their own players. How did you handle that with those that you played with and against?
I'll start. The guys, especially after high school, the guys that I played baseball with up until we were like 50, was a core group of guys that came from Central and a few of us from Eastern. And we started playing in the Bristol Park Department had a baseball team called the Bristol Collegians. And they sponsored that, and we would play at Muzzy Field twice a week. And I think there were like 6 teams in that league, Mike. And most of the other teams were semi-pro. The New London Vagabonds, I think they were called, like played 75 games during the summer. But we had, it was almost like the transition from Legion into another place to play, you know, and the park department was wonderful with that opportunity for us. And Phil played with us. Brian Hammernick, who also played with the Legion, played with us. Certainly Raph and Mike and myself. Steve Libby, and countless others. And it gave us an opportunity to play while we were also, you know, playing college. It gave us an opportunity to play during the summer. But I think the fact that the guys played so often together and they respected from each other from the rivalry of the Eastern Central thing, that really formed a bond. Like Mike talked about that game that when we were in 8th grade against each other. You know, one of the first times that I pitched in the Collegiate League, Mike ended up catching me. You know, so, and that wasn't what he was doing at the time. He was either playing the infield or the outfield, but he stepped up to catch because Billy McCabe wasn't there that night. But the point being is that bond of always playing together, and fortunate, that group of guys, we won a lot of championships. So to win championships, there's got to be a bond. I mean, you got to have obviously skill and so forth, but each year we went to the fact that we either wanted to win the Collegiate League championship, eventually the Twilight League, and then when we started playing with the Fredette Agency, we wanted to win that championship. So
I can tack on to Bart's statements. You know, Eastern Central, the competition was unbelievable when we were in high school. Forestville Boys Club, Bristol Boys Club, Page Park, Rockville Park. But when we got together on those teams, the chemistry was incredible. You were so proud to be playing with guys from the other side of town as one, as Bristol, that there was no such thing as animosity or jealousy or anything like that. And it carried on to all kinds of to sporting activities. I mean, I played senior league ball with basketball with guys like Gary Dubnansky, who was mentioned before, Ricky O'Brien, and then we had a flag football team.
The first year St. Paul had a full varsity season, took them to the finals of the Class M tournament in their first year as a varsity team. So that was a pretty amazing accomplishment. The other sports, we were pretty good. We lost the heartbreaker to Eastern on our first game at Muzzy Field. They cheated, I believe. They punted to us in the 4th quarter, and our returner fumbled the punt, and somebody from Eastern fell on it, and then they went in to score. But they had a really good group with Dennis Schermerhorn and Ricky Schmaltz and Charlie Hudson. So I believe the final score was 20-14, but who cares?
You weren't catching it one year.
What's that?
You weren't the receiver, were you?
No, they wanted people back there who could catch. Just a couple of other things. Back in those days, in the 60s, and I'm sure these guys that are actually so much older than I am probably know even more of this, but the state of sports and the state of medicine was so much different than it is today. For example, hydration. During football practice, you'd come in August, you'd have double sessions. It would be about, I don't know, 117 degrees. You'd have your helmet and shoulder pads on. You would practice for 2 hours. They'd let you go home for a few hours. Then you'd come back, practice another 2 hours. And during both of those practices, you would go through all those sprints and everything else, along with all the conditioning drills that you did. Halfway through a practice, they would say, all right, we're going to take a break. And we took a break, and they would pass around an ice bucket. And you could take a little handful of ice and put it in your mouth. And they told you You can suck on the ice, but don't swallow the water. Spit it out, because it causes cramps. So, amazingly enough, everybody lived through it. I don't know how. The second thing was, back then, they had a different way of teaching people to tackle in football. They don't do that today, but Mike talked about Mike Moore pulling his neck. Mike had an incredible neck. Well, not everybody did. I had a neck more like a chicken. And you used to have to bull your neck, and you would aim your helmet right in the middle of the guy's numbers to make your tackle. And when you did your tackling drills, one guy would line up, and the other guy would line up, and you ran at each other full speed, and then you stuck your helmet in the middle of his numbers, and you were supposed to make the tackle. I don't know if that was good for us. I also don't know what town I'm in right now. But when they were trying to determine whether you had a concussion or not, and this happened quite a bit too, you maybe would come off the field, there might be blood oozing out of your ear, your eyes were going in two different directions, and the coach would say to you, "What happened?" I don't really know. How many fingers do I have up? Now, they only used 2 fingers, 1 and 2. So you had a 50% shot. 2? You're good, you got your bell rung. Go on back in there. And today, I mean, I've seen kids, you know, come off and say, "I think I feel a little uncomfortable. I brushed up against somebody during our huddle." The trainer says, 3 weeks out, we'll reassess then. It's totally different. So, I don't know. I think we were tougher back then, but we also are a lot dumber now. And then one last story. Don Perno was the varsity coach at St. Paul and then became the head coach at UConn a few years later after he'd been an assistant there for a while. He was known to have a bit of a temper. And just 2 stories. One of these was one of my best friends was a guy named Fred Gio. And Fred was a guy that Don really liked to pick on a lot. Fred screwed up a lot too, but one of the things he would do is during a timeout, when we came off the floor, he would start yelling at Fred, and he would want to stick his finger in Fred's chest. He would poke him in the chest. Not lightly, really poke him in the chest. And Fred always backed away, backed away, backed away. So Don found the answer to that. Before he started poking at Fred's chest, he stamped on his foot, and then he started poking him in the chest. And Fred was like this, almost doing the limbo down to the floor. And Don got his point across. The second one was an incident with me. By the time I was a junior in high school, just as background, I was 5'7" when I was in 7th grade, weighed about 120 pounds, and then in junior year I was 5'7" and weighed about 140 pounds, but I was still 5'7". So I had gone from being a decent basketball player to being like the 11th man on a 12-man team. So we're playing Northwest Catholic. We come in at halftime. We've got 15 turnovers, and we're behind by 22 points. So Coach Perno takes a look at the clipboard, and he goes, 22 turnovers. And he takes the clipboard, and he flings it like a Frisbee off to the side. And the starters were sitting in front of him, and we were sitting on the side. And it's coming at my head. And I ducked, and it hit the bleachers, or hit the locker behind me, and the papers went flying. And he had some more inspirational words, and then everybody went out onto the floor, and his speech really worked well because we lost by 35. Later on, as we were leaving the gym that night, he calls me over. He goes, "Jack, come here, come here." He goes, "Jack, I want to apologize to you. I lost my temper. I shouldn't have done that, and I'm sorry you almost got hit by the clipboard. And I just looked at him and I said, Coach Perno, I didn't have a single turnover, not one. And he looked at me and he goes, you didn't play. I said, that's right. Single turnover. Anyway, since there's no one else here from St. Paul, I will have my meeting with my group. There's a whole booth out in the hallway there. And, I'll meet with you guys. Everybody else can stay in here.
What I'd like to do is let's just throw it open to the audience here, and you know, and then we can come back, and anybody can chime in anytime you want to. I know there's a lot of stories you can talk about, conditioning, etc. Before you leave, I want you all to get your salt pills. So you can take them with you. And everybody remember salt pills? Right? They have a whole bottle of salt pills and everything. Okay. John, you're up. Go ahead.
I have just a quick story about my close friend next to me, Mario Vero.
Is he here tonight or did he come last
Yeah,
week?
that's it. He was here last week with me too. But in 1960, he was a senior and he was the point guard on a team that lost in the finals at UConn to Suffield on the last second basket. Where, by the way, Porky Vieira was the assistant coach to Frank Longo. So anyway, you know, the game is tied and they held the ball for the last minute or so. The ball ends up in a corner, time is running out, and this Ganley lets go with a jumper from deep in the corner, and it goes through right at the buzzer. The buzzer goes off, he catches the ball, has it under his arms, and he's going like this, with all zeros on the clock. Nobody thought that was on. All right, let me try this one. This is about James Nacera.
Wait, follow up on that, because I distinctly remember Coach Vieira telling me that game when he was assistant at Stores.
Yeah.
And Frank Benesky was a well-known fan.
Benesky, right.
He was an all-star in that team in 1960. And everybody knows Bugsy was a great showman. I'm in your corner.
That's right.
I'm in their corner. I said, where'd you get that from? That's from strikeouts. You're out of there! But he was a great umpire. 21, he was still in varsity game.
He was quite a home.
He was tremendous. He was a tremendous umpire.
Bugsy?
Bugsy, yes. Anyway, Coach V said when he slid on the floor in front of Coach Longo and him to dive for a ball, he got up and he was showing off. And it was just, Mike, now's not the time! Now's not the time, because he was such a character.
Yeah,
I loved him.
Yeah, you can tell stories for an hour about him. But I want to tell the story about Mr. Nacera, who, by the way, threw the first touchdown pass for Bristol Central to Eddie Lodvico, who got the first touchdown pass.
Oh.
And the two of them combined on the first basket for Bristol Central. Jimmy got the assist and Eddie got the basket. But that's not the story about Mr. Nacera that I want to tell. When he was in
Sure, wait a minute. You want to tell the story because you didn't get a laugh.
I know. I'm going to try. You tell.
All right. Well, when you were in grammar school in the 50s, the late 50s, or you were going to go to high school the next year, anytime you saw Frank Longo, he would say, where are you going to school next year? I'm going to go to Bristol High School. No. Come to St. Anthony's. Everybody that was an athlete at that time, he wanted you to go to St. Anthony's to play basketball. So anyways, I never went to St. Anthony's, but I went through that every time I went into a store. You going to St. Anthony's? No, I'm not going to St. Anthony's. I'm going to Bristol Central. All right. Now we fast forward to 2001. I just retired. I'm 58 years old. I'm going down to Kuchar's, Biscayne West, for breakfast. And who comes walking out of the front door? It's Frank Long. I'm across the street from him. He looks over and says, Nacera, it's your last chance. You want to see
Jimmy, I got to go with Frank Longo. They came over to our house in 1957, and offered me a full scholarship to St. Anthony's. I was really humbled by it. $50. Won a state championship against the East. I said, Coach, I'm gonna kill that guy, I'm gonna kill him. No, it's okay. It's all about dealing with uncomfortable feelings. I was trying to calm him down. Deal with uncomfortable feelings. I was the world's worst. It's one of my biggest regrets, you know, as I look back. But I was blessed, being at the right time. Coach Dickow, and of course Mark Noem, Frank Oshenko, Ryan Corbin, John Majewski. I mean, come on. You couldn't find better people, you know. And so Bristol's my home. I'm so happy to come back here tonight. It's so sad. The only time I come back, it seems like there's a funeral. You know, you mentioned some great people, but it's all about the people in this room. And we got some great legends here. I wish everyone could share some of the stories that we're doing tonight, because it's truly remarkable. And I'll be quiet now. Go ahead, Coach. You're welcome.
Anybody else, Phil?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Very quick
Go
word
ahead.
of yours.
Wait a minute, we got Phil Kerrigan back.
Okay,
Bill.
one of the coaches, he wasn't here a long time, but he was very influential, and I think his name should be brought up. Through high school, two people were most influential in my life. One is Bernie O'Keefe, okay? And the other one was Norm Gerber, okay? All right?
60s.
All right, he was here for maybe 5 years, but he was a very good coach. Don, maybe you remember the story. Very hot day, okay? And you're right, you know, we used to take salt pills. I thought I was going to become a Mormon for a while. So he had this thing. It was going to be a scrimmage, okay? But he and his other coach had this thing that, you know, it was a war. And he didn't like the way practice was going, all right? Well, we had another kid called Bobby, and I won't give him his last name. He used to hide orange